Hello and welcome. My name is Tom. This is the Enthusiasm Project, Season 5, Episode 14. Yes, that sounded a little bit different. And this is also Series Episode 98. Coming real close to that big 100, which is super exciting. So, changes are afoot. Speaking of which, do you know why your nose could never be 12 inches long? Because then your nose would be a foot. Anyway, all right. So if you're still here, despite that, hello and welcome. Today, I wanted to focus on a few things. I made a few changes with the podcast, nothing crazy, but I just wanted to kind of talk about those and explain them because I think I think it's interesting. And then I also wanted to tie that into when it is time and how to know when it is time to call it quits on a project, on something. And kind of talk about that and dive into that a little bit. So I feel like that could potentially be a heavy-ish conversation, but I think it's also a really important one and a practical one and all that kind of stuff. So first, let's talk about some things that have changed. Number one is what you're hearing me on right now, which is a brand new microphone to me this week because super cool, actually. So this is the Earthworks Icon I think it's just called the Icon Pro. Yes. And basically, if you've ever seen this microphone, I'll put a link in the show notes so that way you can take a look. I'm not doing a video version this week, so it's just audio only. But basically, this is from Earthworks Audio. It's an XLR microphone, and it's like this tiny, solid metal. It's either super futuristic looking or retro futuristic. I can't tell. But it's a condenser microphone, and it's an end address condenser microphone. So it's really interesting. The whole thing is pretty small. It's like the size, really, it's smaller than my hand, which kind of shocked me because I'd only really seen it in pictures, and I thought it was like the size of the Shure SM7B. And then when I got the box and I opened it up, and it was like this little tiny mic right there, I was sort of taken aback by it. And in a way, it almost looks funny on the boom arm because it's like I'm using the Rode PSA 1 Plus right now, which is kind of a big, beefy, heavy-duty boom arm, and this microphone on the end of it, it's like, beep, it's this little tiny thing. But I kind of like that because it's totally out of the way, and the weight of it almost feels the same as the SM7B, even though it's significantly smaller. So it's a dense little guy. But funny kind of story about Earthworks Audio. When they released the Icon Pro, I think this came out. When did this come out? I think this came out like a year ago, something like that. And they reached out to me. I got an email. It said, "Hey, this is who we are. We're coming out with a new microphone. Do you want to, would you like one to try out and all this stuff?" And I sent them the ethics statement, the whole deal. And basically, I ended up saying no thank. Actually, I don't even think I sent them the ethics statement. I just said no thank you right away because I had never heard of Earthworks Audio. And I kind of thought it was just the same. It's one of those things where you don't even really need a very large YouTube channel before you start getting emails from all kinds of like overseas sellers and stuff that just have kind of a lot of times garbage products that no one would actually buy. And then they introduce themselves as like, "We're the leading manufacturer of camera equipment in the world." It's like, I've never heard of you. You're not Canon, you're not Sony, you're not Panasonic, you're not the leading manufacturer of photographic equipment in the world. Like, you are a company that started 8 months ago, and you just rebrand like generic produced stuff that is of poor quality. So I kind of thought you just sort of start getting those emails. Honestly, I think I started getting those when my channel had maybe like 300-400 subscribers. Like, you don't really need a giant channel to just, I think they just have like representatives go through YouTube and find, if we're a camera company, we're going to find everyone who's ever done a camera review, go to their contact page and just send them the same form email over and over again. I thought this was that for some reason because I'd never heard of Earthworks Audio. And of course, they did the introduction of like, "Oh, we're, legendary company, yada, yada, yada." And I was like, no thanks. Then a few weeks later, when the microphone came out, I started seeing the videos for it, and I recognized like, oh, hey, that's that microphone that was in that email to me. But it was on channels like, Curtis Judd did it, Podcastage did it, a bunch of channels that I admire, trust, and respect reviewed the microphone and gave it good reviews. And then I was thinking, uh-oh, was I wrong about something? And then I looked into it and realized, oh no, it's actually like a good microphone. And the reason I had never heard of the company was because it's sort of the opposite of what I had thought, where I was thinking it was this very cheap, no-name company that was trying to act as though they were God's gift to audio. Turns out Earthworks has been around for a long time and produces really, really, really high-end stuff. So if anything, they're trying to like slum it with the independent creators, so to speak. It's probably like a terrible thing to say, but they produce really high-end microphones, really high-end like audio calibration gear, measurement gear, and they were trying to then take a stab at, okay, what if we did a microphone that was geared towards podcaster streaming? There's also a USB version of this microphone. I think the USB version is about $350, and the version I'm using, the XLR version, is $500. And I didn't realize that, so it's actually more expensive than the SM7B, which is always, that's sort of like the baseline of the SM7B in my mind is the baseline of I'm going to invest a significant chunk of money to get a decent microphone that's going to be great sounding, super reliable. In theory, it could be like the last microphone you need to buy. That's kind of where the SM7B sits. And this one is more expensive than that. And so anyway, I felt like, oh, dang, I sort of missed the boat on that one. That would have been kind of a cool microphone to be able to review. And I was watching a video actually, this was super fast. So this was even just like a week ago. I was watching a video on the Epos Vox, I sure hope I'm saying that right, YouTube channel, which is a lot of like gaming gear and streaming gear. But I really like his channel and I love his whole setup and everything. Super nice guy. And he made a video called My Forever Microphone, which was about this microphone. It might have been the USB one. I don't remember. And I thought that was funny because in watching his channel, he seems to, similarly to me, kind of bounce around between different equipment and just sort of, really likes using different stuff. And so I made a jokey comment that was like, oh, forever microphone. Like those are dangerous words because, we've all kind of thought that. And that was it. And then I got an email from Earthworks a couple days later that was like, hey, we saw, actually the title was Forever Microphone, like winky face. And they said that they saw my comment on that video and they were like, hey, do you want to try out this potential forever microphone here? And I sort of told my story of, yeah, I think I was approached way back when it was coming out. I honestly didn't know what the deal was. And I said no, and I've been kind of regretting it. And they're like, okay, cool. They were super nice about, even before I sent them to the ethics statement, he was like, I've already seen your website, your ethics statement, everything's good. This is just a gift. There's no obligation, no commitment, no anything. We just would like to send you a gift, which is kind of amazing if you think about it. And so I said, sure, that would be great. And this was probably, I don't know when this would have been. We'll say this was like 1 p.m. on Wednesday, and literally by 10 a.m. on Tuesday, or that would be weird, 10 a.m. on Thursday, the microphone showed up. So somehow they got it from New Hampshire to California, super overnight. And I was like, wow, geez. And it turns out the microphones are like designed in the United States, manufactured in the United States, which is kind of, it's cool. I like it. It's one of the things I like about Rode is that they design and manufacture all their stuff in Australia, like where they're at. I think that's really cool. So I was kind of won over by this, and then I got the microphone and it's amazing. And then I plugged it in and listened to it and was just like kind of blown away by the sound. So hopefully you're listening to this and thinking that it sounds good, because I can't believe this microphone, honestly. As it got delivered, I was in the middle of doing a voiceover for next week's video. And I started with the SM7B, and then I got interrupted because the doorbell rang with the microphone, and I pulled it out and tried it. And then the rest of the video is the Earthworks. So if you listen to this week's video, the parts where I'm on camera, it's a whole hodgepodge of microphones, but there's a lot of parts where I'm either on camera or just moving the camera around and like talking from behind the camera. That's all the VideoMic Pro NTG. The first intro voiceover is the SM7B, and then all of the other voiceovers are the Earthworks. You can definitely hear the shift in microphones. And the SM7B has, especially in the past, I don't know, we'll say 6 months, has really warmed up to me and wormed its way into my heart as a microphone that I really love more than I ever expected to. And it's such a good, just easy, it's such an easy choice. When I want something that I just know is going to sound good on like any voice, that's the one to go to. And then I plug this in, and without changing anything, adjusting anything, I thought, oh, this sounds better. And it doesn't have quite the low end smoothness that the SM7B has, but I feel like this is a lot more. It's like in the same vein as the NT1, I guess, because it is a condenser microphone. It just feels like it's got better EQ, even though I haven't done any EQ to it. I don't know how else to describe that. It's a really cool sounding microphone, and it's super quiet. If I shut my yap for a second, there's really no background noise, no hiss, no anything. It's running into the Rodecaster right now, and the channel fader is just below halfway, and the gain, where do I have the gain at? The gain's at 20, and of course I do have phantom power turned on because it is a condenser microphone, so it needs phantom power. But I'm so impressed with this microphone. So that's my 10-minute story about the microphone that I'm using today, and it's very, very cool. I'm sure you'll see it pop up in videos. I will probably do a video review on it, because I also, not just because I want to review the microphone, because that's been done, but I want to kind of dive into the history, the stuff I didn't know, the things that if I had known them, I probably would have said yes when they approached me over a year ago, but I didn't know, and I said no, because I didn't know, you know? All right. The other things that have changed, podcast related, microphones change, a lot. And in fact, this week's video, the one that's going to be coming out in a few days, if you're listening to this episode when it was released, is all about, I added another like microphone wall in my studio where I put mounts on the wall so I could just mount microphones. You might have seen it in the background of a lot of videos. I have 4 microphones mounted on the wall, and I did that again. And so the video is all about how I did that and why I did that and the whole process there. And one of the things I like about that is by having the microphones just out and mounted like that, it's so quick and easy to just switch between them. It's like if you see them, you're more likely to use them, as opposed to if they're in a drawer or a cupboard or something, you might forget like, oh, dang, I did have this, which is like the most first world problem. I forget what kind of cool gear you have. And I know I don't need all these microphones, but I enjoy them. And there's also the part where on my channel, when I'm talking about microphones, doing comparisons is very important. And so being able to not just talk about that microphone, but also think about, okay, people who are interested in this are probably also going to be comparing it to XYZ. So let me bring in those ones if I have them, so that way I can do the direct comparison to try to make the videos as helpful as possible. So that's also a reason why it's like, you don't need that many microphones. That's a reason why. And if I truly don't need one and I'm not going to use one, then I do try to find a new home for it. So I try to make sure all the gear is being used, and if I'm not using it, then it goes somewhere else. Just, that's my public service announcement about that. But anyway, the other things that changed, I don't know how I transitioned to this, but anyway, the other things that have changed, podcast related, as you probably noticed, are artwork and intro songs. So let's talk about those, because there's fun stories behind them. And I think it was Caleb Pike from DSLR Video Shooter. I was listening to a podcast from him ages ago. I forget what it was. It might have been the Golden Hour podcast. I'm not sure. But he was on a podcast, and he was talking about when you want to make a big change in something creative like a YouTube channel or a podcast or whatever, a lot of times people will make a big deal about, here's my announcement video. Now I'm talking, you kind of walk everyone through every step of the way. And Caleb said, I just do it. Like, don't make a big deal about it. Just make the change and go for it. And I've liked that for the most part. And then if you get a lot of questions, you can always address it. And so I made 2 big changes to the podcast this week, which were the artwork and the theme song. And that is what ties into the theme of today's show. So I promise this is not all unrelated. Talking about the artwork first, the artwork I've had since the podcast started almost 3 years ago has been fine. Like I actually don't dislike it, which is rare to make something 3 years ago and not dislike it now, but actually it was fine. But it wasn't, I don't think, as good as it could be, because it was kind of slapdash, to be honest. It was like, oh, I'm setting up my podcast. I need artwork. Here is a picture of me from a video thumbnail. Here are some images from my YouTube channel banner that I was working on at the time. And I just sort of like put them in a 3,000 pixel by 3,000 pixel canvas. And added the logo, and there we go. And it worked. Like it honestly totally worked. And the picture of me is not even a picture; it's a screen grab from a video. So it's like it's not ideal, podcast design stuff, but it's worked and I've liked it. But it was never quite up to it just wasn't as good as I thought it could be. And so I've been trying to work on new podcast artwork for a while now. And I wasn't getting it. Like I was trying all kinds of different compositions with things, different graphics. I tried taking different photos, could I go serious with it? Could I go goofy with it? Could bright colors, like whatever. I just couldn't get it. And I was like kind of playing around and sort of like coming up with things that I thought were okay, but they weren't like a clear step up. It was more of a lateral move. Like, well, this is different and that's nice, but it's not necessarily like better than the one that's already there. And then I realized on my gallery wall of photos, the blue wall that's in the background, up at the top, there's a gift from Heather's brother, who is an incredibly talented artist. I'll put a link to him in the description as well. And last year, well, actually for the past year, he's been learning Blender, the 3D design, modeling, animation software, which is amazing and it's totally free. I'm trying to learn Blender presently. It's really fun. Totally recommend Blender if you want to poke around in something new and fun and different. Anyway, he spent like a year learning it, but he also has a background as like a Disney Imagineer and a graphic artist and a designer. And like he's one of those people that's just like annoyingly good at everything and has such a good design taste and personal style. And so for my birthday last year, he made this portrait of me in my studio. So it's very much as things were in December of 2020. It's like, it's got my chair, it's got my wall, it's got the artwork on the wall. I'm wearing a blue plaid shirt. There's the drums and guitars in the background. There's even a pod mic with the blue XLR cable on my desk because I was using the pod mic with the tabletop stand at the time for podcasts and things. And then the whole style, so the whole thing was put together in Blender, and he actually has like a slightly animated version, which is really cool. But it's also done in the style of Animal Crossing because that's like one of my favorite games ever. And when Animal Crossing New Horizons came out in March of 2020, I was hooked, and I have put a lot of time into that game, and it's gotten us through some really tough times over the past year and a half. And so at the end of last year, it just made sense, like, he wanted to do a piece of art, and it's like Tom, but it's Animal Crossing style. Anyway, that's the whole thing, and it's great, and I love it. So immediately I hung it on the wall, which is funny because it's like a picture of me and the wall on the wall. But it's kind of like up high, and so I don't think it really shows up in videos that often. Basically, no one really gets to see it except for me and like Heather when she's in here. And it's really cool, and it doesn't get the appreciation that I think it should get. And so anyway, I asked Kevin if I could use it as podcast artwork, and he was like, "Oh yeah, sure, that'd be no problem at all." And so I kind of like, played with it a little bit to make it fit in the square canvas of a podcast artwork. And it turned out to work great because it was like, oh, it's bright and colorful. It looks different. It's got literally me sitting there with a microphone. And it just so happens that one of the artworks in the background is my name. So it's even got my name on it. And it's like, it was almost like perfectly made as podcast artwork. And so I got really excited about that, and then decided to switch it up, and I like it. It's very different. It's like so starkly different. I didn't think I would care that much changing the podcast artwork, but I guess I got used to something after 3 years of like, this is how it's supposed to be. And so seeing something different was kind of jarring at first, but now that I'm used to the change, I really, really like it. And I think there's a cool story behind it, but it is also weird because this is all the kind of thing that I normally do myself because I'm such a control freak. So I would normally design it from scratch. Whereas, I mean, like, I did tweak it and make it fit a little bit, but the artwork is not artwork I put together. It's artwork that someone else made, but there's such a cool story. Like, it's someone that I care about. It's someone who's super talented. They put it together for a really cool reason. There's all this meaning behind it. And I thought that was really neat. So in this case, it was okay to like let go of the reins a little bit, let go of some of that control to get something that's better than what I was coming up with. So anyway, that's the story behind the new artwork. I'll put a link to Kevin's website in the show notes as well. And it'll pretty much be there from here on out, just to give him credit for the artwork, because I think that's cool. And it's fun to go see all the different work that he's doing. Kevin also has a YouTube channel this week, crossed the 20,000 subscriber mark. I'll put a link to that as well. It's a lot of Blender based stuff, both like progress and artwork, and then some tutorial and process stuff. So it's really, really cool. It's crazy he hit that milestone after a little over a year of doing YouTube. So he's very good at what he does, basically, is what I'm saying there. And then the other thing is the theme song, which you might recognize as the theme song from the Ska podcast, which I did a whole story about this, so we don't need to rehash the whole thing. But this was based on a song, kind of like a goofy song that Patrick Boberg, who listens and pops into chats and stuff, put together as like kind of a joke when he was like, "Hey Tom, when are you going to start that ska podcast?" And then my friend Mike Alvarez, who I've known since like high school and who is a professional musician, he asked if he could take the jokey idea that Patrick put together and turn it into an actual song for the ska podcast intro when I was starting that podcast. And Patrick was okay with it. Mike then played every instrument, so he's playing the guitar, the drums, the bass, and the horns, so it's all real horns. It's not like synthesized horns, which is very, very cool. And so that's been the theme song to the Ska podcast, which I think is a very cool story, that it's like two friends from totally different universes came together. And then both of them, like, I've had Mike on multiple episodes of the Ska podcast, and I've also had Patrick on the Ska podcast, so we got to dive deep into that. But I haven't made an episode of the Ska podcast in like a month and a half. And I feel very bad because I've never creatively been in that situation where I've started my YouTube channel and kept with it, started this podcast, kept with it, started, I guess there was the break in the podcast that I do with Peter, but that was like out of necessity because his studio wasn't ready to be doing podcasts in, and like I was working. So it was just paused. It wasn't like it was over or anything. We just knew we have to put it on pause for a while because we got to take care of other stuff on both our sides, and then we can come back and continue it. And the couples table has been going strong for, almost 70 episodes now. So the Ska podcast made it to like 7 episodes, and then I haven't done any more. And that is where I've been thinking about, like, okay, I don't want to say I'm done with it, but I'm done with it weekly. And it's not because I don't like it. It's just sort of like I kind of got it out of my system. And then it turned out that having a 4th podcast was also kind of a lot of work every week. And maybe I wanted to direct that energy elsewhere. But I, so far, have like never given up on a creative endeavor. And I don't want to say I'm giving up on it, so I'll keep that door cracked open a little bit. But definitely not something that's weekly. And I have like some ideas for future episodes I would like to do. And every once in a while, I might talk to someone where it just sort of fits. Like I know I'm planning to do an interview with somebody probably late November, early December, where I could fit them in basically any of the podcasts that we do, but it makes the most sense to put them on the Ska podcast. So there'll be an episode there. So I think it's going to be something where it's like when I have a reason to make an episode, then I'll make a new episode. For listeners, I know that kind of sucks because you never know, like, it's not a part of your weekly schedule. It's not like consistent in a way, but creatively, that's just what works because I wanted to make it. I kind of like got out all this stuff that I wanted to get out. I told these stories that I wanted to tell. I did some interviews that I wanted to do, and I'm like really, really happy with the episodes that are there. I think they came out great. I think they're awesome. They deliver a lot. If you haven't listened to them, totally recommend it. But then it got to a point where I was trying to think, okay, next week's episode could be, I kind of have some ideas, but I'm definitely sort of forcing it and it's not coming naturally. So maybe I don't need to do it this week. And I gave myself the permission not to make an episode that week. And now that was like 6 weeks ago. And I think I just need to come to terms with, like, I guess you could call it calling it quits on a project, or at least definitely pressing the pause button on a project. But that's okay because, like I said, I made something that I'm proud of and that I had a lot of fun doing, but I sort of just feel like I got it out of my system, at least on a weekly basis. And it's interesting because thinking back when I started this podcast, originally, I talked about this early on, so I won't tell the entire story, but basically, I had wanted to start a podcast for a while that was my own, and not one I was making for somebody else. And I was used to making YouTube videos, but the thing about YouTube videos was that they need to be pretty succinctly edited and punchy and attention grabbing. And so you don't always get to explore stuff in depth the way you might want to normally. And then I was also working as a teacher where even though I might have a 90-minute class period, you definitely ain't nobody listen to what I'm saying for a full 90 minutes. You have to give time for students to work on their own stuff. Even when I'm doing like a lecture or a lesson, it was like, just because of the way a high school classroom works, where I've said this before, even with good students and good classroom management and all that, you still have to stop every sentence or two and like wait for somebody to stop talking or remind somebody to put their phone away, or somebody walks in with a message, or the phone rings, or there's an announcement over the PA system. Like you feel like a crazy person because you have this information, you have these thoughts that you want to share, but you cannot get them out in one piece. And so for me, starting the podcast was a way that I could go, hey, I can press record and I can explore a thought as long as it takes. If it's 20 minutes, if it's an hour, if it's 2 hours, I can just uninterrupted explore ideas, share thoughts. And it really it was so therapeutic because I hadn't gotten that outlet anywhere else. And podcasting was really the only thing that could give that to me. And that was where this show started. And so the first season is it's quite a hodgepodge of stuff that's just like things that were on my mind and things that I wanted to explore at the time. And it was really fun. And then eventually I got to a point where I was kind of feeling sort of the same as with the ska podcast, where it was like, oh, I think I'm done. I think I got that out of my system. Like I explored all the things, but I really, really, really liked doing the podcast. And so it was sort of this different thing where I felt like I had gotten it out of my system, but I wanted to keep going, but I knew I had to kind of like tweak something to make it work. So I decided, okay, I'll take a break and then I'll come back with sort of a little bit more of a focused approach. And then that's what I decided, oh, this will be season 1 and then season 2. It just so happened that I felt that way after 21 episodes. So that's why I do 21 episode seasons. It's pretty arbitrary. If I had felt that way after 15 or 25, that's how long the seasons would be. But 21 episodes in that first season was how long it took before I felt like, okay, I've done it. And then take a little break and then come back for 21 more episodes. And I've typically had sort of loose themes, whether they're obvious or not, at least guiding me in how I'm approaching episodes per season. It's not that they're all super different, but at least it kind of, it's become very focused on people who create stuff, whether it's podcasts, YouTube channels, that kind of thing, and trying to navigate that world, explore that world, and have fun along the way while you're trying to do these things. And that's sort of where the podcast has landed now, in the back half of season 5, which is really cool. But that's sort of a different feeling than I had with the ska podcast, where I was like, this is really fun. I enjoyed it. I feel like I did a good job, and I'm happy to sort of just like put a pin in that for the time being, unless I decide that I want to change something. However, it had this amazing theme song where, friends had come together to make something. And I had found myself trying to come up with episode ideas because I didn't want the song to go to waste, because I didn't want the work and the time to not be used and to not be appreciated. And so I was realizing, well, if I'm just trying to make an episode of this podcast just so I can use the theme song, why don't I just make that the theme music to the podcast that I always do, like every week? That makes more sense, because the song that I had been using for a while, I really like. It's a ska song. It sounds great. I'm a big fan of it. But it is an Epidemic Sound royalty-free song, so anybody with an Epidemic Sound subscription can use that song in their projects, which is fine, but it's not, it's not super unique or anything. Whereas this has a cool story behind it, and it fits, and it's funny to me, and I enjoy it. And so now every week I can use that song that has that cool story behind it on my podcast with the artwork that has a cool story behind it. And, those things can change, but I think that's fun. I think those are fun changes, and part of those changes had to occur with like deciding when to end something and when to start something else. And I was even thinking like, oh, I would make these changes going into season 5, or season 6, I should say. But that's not, season 6 probably won't start till like January, and I didn't want to wait. I'm super impatient. I want to start now. So that's why I made those changes. But then it really got me thinking about what it means to call it quits on something. And there's this thing there's two things actually that were brought up on the couples table this past week, which Heather said, which was very nice. She said that Tom is very dedicated and very loyal and very committed. He's never missed a Thursday upload. He's always working on stuff. He's always, he's always doing it, even when it's tough or when it doesn't feel like, he's always just like, meeting the commitments that he set and all these things. And it made me feel really good to hear that. Heather's told me those things before, of course, but it felt really good to hear. And it's a nice little ego boost. And I think that's true. I think that's a trait that I am proud of having built up over the years. It's not just something that was like innately natural. It took a lot of practice to do those things and to figure that out, to get to a point where I can set a goal and then just do whatever is needed to achieve that goal, which a lot of times involves, hard work or discomfort or whatever it might be. But it also can be a detriment because there have been plenty of times, whether it's work-related, relationship-related, living arrangement-related, whatever it might be, life-related, where I've probably stuck with things significantly longer than I should have just because I had made the, in my mind, I'm going to do this thing, so I will just keep doing it, even though it's like, you're just driving off a cliff. It's like, but I said I would continue driving in this direction. It's like, yeah, but maybe you should turn a little bit there. And learning how to do that has actually been really hard for me. But overall, I like the quality, but it also, something I brought up on the couples table this past week that I've been thinking about, is it also borders on this, like, it's a weird relationship with that idea of hustle culture and all the stuff that we've talked about before of, working yourself to the bone and trying to be proud of like, well, I work 100 hours a week and I only sleep 3 hours a night. You think you haven't gotten a day off in 2 months and that's bad? I haven't taken a day off in 6 months. And it's like, wow, this is all depressing. And it sounds like everybody's losing because it's all terrible. There's like that part of it. But there's also the part where if you do want to make something or build something or try something new, you do kind of have to push yourself a bit, like if you're going to the gym and your goal is to get strong, every time it's hard to lift a weight or your muscles get sore, if that's when you stop because it's like, well, I don't want to make myself sore or do anything, you'll never progress, So it's like, it's hard to navigate that balance between when you do need to push yourself to do something versus when it's okay to not do that or to even avoid that because it's not productive and it's not worth it. And I was thinking back to a couple of different things. So I was thinking, when it comes to starting a YouTube channel, one of the most common questions that I actually get is, how do you balance a YouTube channel with a full-time job or a full-time job and a family? And I do not have an answer, but I did do the YouTube/full-time job thing for a number of years. And the answer is that it was hard. There's no like, oh, you just do this or here's a magic solution. It's just like, it's actually kind of hard, but I really enjoyed doing YouTube. And so I wanted to make that a priority. But I also knew that there was an opportunity cost there because by focusing on the YouTube channel, meant I wasn't going to be able to do other things. And I just kind of knew that. And I didn't start the channel with the idea that it would eventually one day be my job, but it was still something I was spending a lot of time and energy on outside of work. And it just became something that I wanted to prioritize in my life. And then it eventually started growing. And when it got to the point where it was not only generating revenue, but generating enough that it like could potentially be an option to replace my normal income, and just the time commitment was growing and growing, then I knew I can't keep doing both of these forever. So if I have to choose, do I do the career where I'm working for someone else or do I invest fully in myself? Well, the answer was put things in place so that you can focus on investing in yourself, not investing in something for someone else, especially, I'm sorry, but public education in the US is totally broken. I did not want to continue investing in that system. We don't need to get super political, but those are my thoughts based on a lot of experience, but that's just kind of, I guess what I was also thinking about was when I first became a teacher, because I graduated with my bachelor's degree in 2009, which was a terrible time economically. If you remember back then, there were no jobs anywhere, and especially in teaching, teachers were getting laid off. You could not get hired as a teacher anywhere. There's no room for new teachers. And so when I graduated with, wanting to be an English teacher, and that was not going to be possible, I was trying to figure out, what do I do? And I figured like I might as well just go to school. I'll just keep going to school and get a degree and get a graduate degree. And, then maybe when I'm done with that, things will be better. No one in my family had ever even gone to school pretty much less a graduate degree. So that seemed like a cool thing to try. And so I enrolled in a master's program. But the problem with it, even though the program was fantastic, was it was going to be 2 years. And then there was still no clear direction of getting a job. And at that point, it was I had zero money. I wanted to have hey, I can live in a nice place and afford food and stuff and possibly even have a little money in savings. That's what I wanted. And there was no real clear way to get to that through that program. So then I started thinking, okay, if the world's falling apart and economically everything's terrible, in addition to teaching, I'm also very interested in art and creativity. So I applied to an art school in LA, which is a really competitive, one of the best art schools there is. I applied to their graphic design program and got accepted, which was crazy and super exciting. And then I was thinking, okay, I'll just get a different degree. I'll go get a design degree and just change everything. And it got to the point where I was even looking at places to live in Pasadena. I was looking at weird little rooms for rent and stuff, whatever I could maybe kind of afford. And I was trying to figure out financially how this would work, because I had, for my English degree, I went to community college and a state school. And I worked the whole time. So I was able to make it through that without any loans. But this was a private art school. And not only that, they actually prohibited you from working while you attended, because the course load and the workload was so intense that there was no time to work. So I don't really know how people afford to go there, because for the 2-year program with the classes and the living expenses, it was going to be $200,000. And I was I guess this is why people take out loans, and then you're just stuck paying this back for the rest of your life. I don't know. So I was on the precipice of considering that, because I didn't know what other options there were. And it just felt, I was thinking it's too much. It's really cool. I feel like that would be fun. It'd be a great school, but I already have a degree. I don't have any debt. What if I went back and looked at, a teacher prep program, which is significantly more affordable and leads directly towards at least being, not necessarily towards employment, especially at the time, but at least it puts you in a position where you're directly employable. And I remember, I think I've talked about this on here before too, but going from the art school, which is, super cool and hip and trendy and all this stuff, to the admissions office at the teacher prep school program, where it was in this crappy office with a dead plant in the corner and a wobbly chair and just sad fluorescent lighting, and just going okay, this is a stark contrast to super cool hipster world that it was right there. But it kind of made more sense. And so I decided, they had a program where the teaching credential was a year, or you could take a 2-year program to get a teaching credential and a master's degree. And at this point I was okay, 2 years is a long time. I signed up for the program, and then I had to petition them and sign all these waivers to overload my schedule, because you're also teaching the whole time. So you can't work really also, because you're student teaching, which is slavery, because you're just working for free basically while you're also then going to school. So anyway, I decided if I could do this in a year, maybe that would be achievable. So I overloaded my schedule to do the credential and the master's in a year. And I just knew going into it, I remember sitting there and thinking, okay, for the next year, I will not be doing anything else. I will not be doing anything fun. I will not be going anywhere. I will not be like hanging out with people. I will have no social life. I will like all of that stuff, hanging out, just leisure time. None of that will be possible for the next year, but it's for that year. And after that, I will be a certified teacher with a master's degree. And then I can just try and, find any open position and then try to stick around until I can move into a better position, which is basically what ended up happening. And that was a really tough, exhausting year, but knowing that it was a year did definitely help, because it's, as stressed out and as exhausted as I was, there was always that light at the end of the tunnel of like, okay, I'm starting in August. By next August, this will be done. And that is what happened. And it's a weird thing. Like, I am proud of that, as much as I do hate the like, oh, I don't ever take a day off. And as much as I hate that stuff, in this case, I was proud of it because there was a clear purpose behind it. Like, I knew why I was doing this. I knew what the outcome would be. I just had to put in the time and the work to get there. And there was a clear deadline. Like, it wasn't, I could not have sustained that for multiple years or anything. It was a one-time push of like to the end there. And I'm proud of that. And that worked out really well. And even though I left teaching this year, feeling very burnt out and tired and kind of cynical about the education system, you could say, I am actually super grateful for the 11 years I spent teaching, because I learned a lot. It was a really good career. I had really cool experiences. I feel like I was able to make a positive impact, and I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now, at least in the way I can do it, had I not done that. So there was, and it set up a foundation. Like, that's what helped me be able to buy a house. By the time I was 30, that, gave me a lot of stability that I wanted, bought a lot of groceries, that kind of good stuff, health insurance, yay. So I have a lot of gratitude for that, even though that's not what I'm doing anymore. But taking it all the way back to when someone asks, like, how do you balance a YouTube channel and this? It's like, well, it's always going to be tough. But if you have a reason why you're doing it and you sort of have some kind of plan, if it's just to be exhausted forever, that's not a great plan. But if you can figure out, like in my case, it was for the teaching credential thing, like, okay, this next year is going to be really tough, but it's 1 year. So, okay, I'm balancing YouTube and full-time job or family, but after 6 months, maybe something will change. Maybe there'll be a work shift that changes. Maybe your YouTube production schedule will change. There might be something that changes. It's always tough to say with YouTube, because in my personal experience, anybody who has started a channel with the intent for it to be a business or become their full-time thing has not succeeded at that. I don't personally know anybody who said, I'm going to start a channel so that it can be my business, who actually made that happen. Everybody I know who has a YouTube channel that is their full-time job or their business or whatever started it just to start a channel. And I didn't really realize this connection until I was planning out what I was going to talk about on this episode, but it's entirely true. Everybody I know who does YouTube full-time started it just for fun. And then in some cases, it just, like in my case, it kind of slowly started growing and like, oh, hey, here's some revenue. Gee, what if could I also tweak this over here? And maybe that's a little more like you're kind of experimenting a little bit until it gets to a point. And for other people, it's sort of, they went from very casual hobby level and then their channels blew up. And then it very quickly became, oh, now this is like a massive, business force over here that they have to suddenly figure out how to work on. But in all of those cases, it was, I'm just starting YouTube because I want to start YouTube. I like it. I want to make videos. I want to share something. It had nothing to do with, I want to earn money and I want to, it's just like that pressure you put on yourself for things. And I guess another example would be, I'm sitting in my room right now, as depicted in the animated artwork for this podcast, and I'm surrounded by instruments. That is not how I make a living. Musical instruments have only cost me money in my life. They've never generated revenue, ever. But I have more of them than anything else. My room is mostly full of guitars and drums and things, even though that's not the main thing that I do. even though that's not the thing I'm even best at. Like, I'm way better at other stuff than playing music, but those are the things that are there, and it's not a failure just because I don't generate money with the music, even though I've been playing, I've been playing guitar for 20 years. I'm playing drums for 6 years. And then, there's other stuff. I got my theremin over there and some synthesizers and things for, 10, 15 years for different stuff like that. And I definitely don't sound like I've been playing for that long. I do not sound or have the skills of what you would expect someone who has been playing guitar for 20 years to have. But I still enjoy playing guitar just as much now as I did when I was 15 years old and got my guitar from the pawn shop, because it's just really fun. Prior to that, I remember I was 11 years old, and that was when I had wanted to start playing the drums. I wanted to play the drums or the violin. Those were the two options in my mind. Very different instruments. And my mom was smart, and she pushed me towards violin because, drums are expensive and loud. And the violin it just made more sense. So she was super encouraging, helped me get a violin, and then she also knew someone who was a violin teacher, so set me up with lessons. And so every week, I think it was every Sunday, I would go to violin lessons, and I got pretty decent I honestly don't remember how long I went, but I got to the point where I could read music, I could, play songs, and I could even, sometimes he would test me out by, putting a piece of music in front of me that I hadn't seen before. Nothing too complicated, of course. But I could play it and it would sound like the song, which was pretty cool. Sight reading music. That's awesome. But I really did not enjoy playing the violin. And I remember I was thinking about this, and it's from the time I got my violin, I was 11, so you didn't want an 11-year-old messing with a delicate instrument like that. But I remember getting the violin, maybe it was a Christmas gift or something, and being told okay, don't touch it, don't try to play with it, don't try to tune it, don't do anything, wait until your lesson, and then the instructor will show you how to do all that stuff. And from lesson 1, even though my teacher was super nice and really skilled and stuff, that's how it was. All I knew with the violin was hold it here, put fingers here, do it this way, do it that. It was all of the very theory heavy, proper traditional way of doing it. Practice 30 to 60 minutes a day. And it's funny because, my mom has always been pretty easygoing, but that was the one thing where I remember she was very much, did you practice 30 minutes? Make sure you practice 30 to 60 minutes. And there were some times where I would practice and she wouldn't have heard it. She'd be, outside or somewhere else. And then she would say did you practice today? I'm yeah, I did. She's I didn't hear it. Practice again. I was And so it didn't take long before I didn't want to play the violin anymore. And then eventually I sold the violin to my violin teacher, and then I used the money that I got from it to buy GoldenEye for the Nintendo 64, which was a different kind of a left turn compared to learning classical music. But to contrast that with going to the pawn shop when I was 15 and getting a guitar that was pretty crappy, and then using the internet to figure out tabs and stuff, because at that point I had totally forgotten how to read music, and just figuring out songs that I liked and learning little bits about technique. Still didn't know notes and chords and all that kind of stuff, but was still able to play the guitar. And then even then I tried to take some guitar lessons. I lived in a small town, so it was this is the music store, that's the guitar teacher in town. If you want to learn guitar, that's the only person that can teach you. And if they're living in this town, it's probably because things aren't going that well for them. So good luck. And I remember I signed up for lessons, and I was okay, I'm going to really learn the guitar. And it was kind of the same thing as the violin, where it was not about enjoying it, not about having fun. It was just, here, run through these scales, run through these chords, do this. You have to hold your finger this way. You have to do it that way. And I was this sucks. I am not enjoying this. And I probably would have quit if I kept doing that, which I know is terrible, because it's that's how you learn. I wish I still knew how to read music. I wish there was a happy medium I had discovered. But leaving that, I still play guitar now 20 years later, and I still have a ton of fun doing it, even if half the stuff I do is wrong, or I'm not as good as I could have been if I'd done. But it made it sustainable. And I think with YouTube, it's very much the same thing. If you start it putting the pressure of okay, I'm going to start something from zero and this is going to be my new job or this is going to be the new direction of my life. Oh man, like you're kind of just setting yourself up for failure, because as soon as those things don't happen or they don't happen to the degree that you want them to, you're going to feel like a failure. You're going to want to call it quits. Whereas if you just kind of push through a little, I shouldn't say push through, if you start something from a place of excitement or enthusiasm, you might say, then that will sustain you because it's fun to just do the thing. You know, it's fun to just learn how to play guitar in your bedroom when you're in high school, and it doesn't matter that other people don't hear you. It doesn't matter that you're not getting a bunch of money or something for it. You're having fun playing guitar. It's fun to make videos. It's fun to share what you know. It's fun to put that online so that other people could see it. And you can feel satisfied and rewarded with that, even if there's not a massive following, even if there's not a bunch of money. And chances are when you're doing that, it's going to be easier for you to sustain it because you're getting a different reward out of it. You know, you're just getting a different reward out of it personally than if it's all just based on numbers or revenue or whatever. And then ironically, a lot of times it seems like that is kind of what the secret sauce is for eventually having it be something that builds higher numbers or revenue, because people can feel that. People can tell when somebody is doing something that they're enjoying that draws people in. If you're making a video and you're excited to make it and you're having fun and people watch it, there's like an intangible thing that people can feel. Whereas if you're doing it because you have to do it because you got to make this week's upload, people can also feel that, and that sucks. And it's probably not going to help you grow very much. So it's sort of this weird thing of like, how do you balance those things out? I don't really know, but a lot of it comes down to why you're doing something in the first place. And a lot of it does come down to also being realistic with yourself, you know, like knowing when something has run its course, I guess. Maybe you're making a podcast that doesn't need to be an ongoing thing that hits 100 episodes or more. Maybe you're doing a podcast that is a 7-episode little series and then it's done and it's complete and that's its own thing. That's one completed like project, I guess. And then you can move on to the next thing. And that's okay. At the same time, navigating that world of you're starting something and now it's getting difficult and you feel like, I don't want to do this anymore. Should you continue to do it and push yourself, or should you stop? It's something you really need to like take time to think about. And that's where, you know, there's the dangers of hustle culture where it's like, yeah, just rise and grind and blah, 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 and work. You know, you could sleep when you're dead, etc., which is all just dumb and terrible. But if you want to, do something extraordinary, sometimes you got to kind of take extraordinary measures to push yourself a little bit, but you should understand why you're doing it. And that if it's not working out, instead of just saying like, well, I absolutely hate doing this YouTube thing and I hate making videos, but I said I was going to make a video every week for the next 6 months, so I'm going to torture myself and do it. There might not be a benefit to that versus like, I said I'm going to make a video every week for the next 6 months, so I'm going to keep doing that. And I want to, that's a personal growth goal that I want to accomplish, and then I will see where things are. Then that's a very different approach to basically the same thing. And sometimes the best thing you can do is say no to something or call it quits on something, because then that opens you up to work on other things, to focus on other things, and to say yes to other things that you might not even know about. You don't do something right now, or you don't work on something right now, and then in 3 months something else that you never even thought of that you don't even know about right now shows up, and now you can fit that into your life because you're not wasting your time doing something that doesn't really fit, that you're just forcing yourself to do for no reason. But again, then there's the flip side of like, well, if you want to grow a YouTube channel or something like that, but you don't want to spend time making videos, making good videos, planning videos, editing them, uploading them, you're not going to. So it's I guess it all comes down to intent and purpose and trying to figure out what your outcome is, which can rarely effectively be tied to something like revenue or subscriber growth or whatever, because you have no control over that. But it can be directly tied to personal goals like, certain number of videos, achieving a certain skill, get, whatever it might be, like something really specific. I'm going to upload every week for 6 months. I'm going to make 100 videos this year. I'm going to, whatever it might be, like something that's reasonable, but does kind of push you to try hard and build a new skill set. I think those are good, healthy things, but it's such a fine line between what's healthy and what's not. So I don't think I have a grand conclusion as we try to take this thing in for a landing, but it's just sort of bringing up the idea that sometimes you'll start a project and it might not be, nothing's going to last forever, right? Like everything is eventually going to end, but there might be certain things you want to start with the intent to continue doing for the foreseeable future. Personally speaking, like that's YouTube, that's this podcast. Like I just want to continue to do them as long as I possibly can. And then there are other things that you might do where you decide like maybe it's not something that needs to be done that long. Maybe it's something that you get out of your system, something that you just feel is finished and it's complete as is. And then it's okay to say, okay, I'm done with that. I'm proud of it. I learned a lot from it. And now I'm going to move on to something else or focus on other things instead of dragging this thing on before, to the point where now it's not benefiting anybody. So ultimately, as kind of per usual, I think these thoughts are sometimes fun to explore because you might be feeling similar things with some projects, with some experiences, and it's always nice just to know that other people also like understand that and feel that. So that's what I wanted to share and cover today on my new microphone with my new artwork and semi-new, repurposed, I should say, theme music on this episode. So next week is episode 99, and then there's episode 100. I definitely want to do something special for episode 100, which I'm thinking of doing a Q&A episode, and I've done those before, and I haven't done one in a while, but I would like to make sure to put the call for questions out early, so that way I can collect like a bunch, and instead of just answering every random question that comes in, maybe I can kind of curate a selection of questions that is more beneficial to listen to, if that makes sense. So anyway, if you're not already, keep an eye out on my Twitter and Instagram, Sodar Tom, on both of those things. And usually on the YouTube community page, I'll post stuff. And if you're a channel member or Patreon, we usually post it in the Discord as well. So that way you can get those questions in the next couple weeks. But I'll put out a call sometime soon to do that. And then also, if you have thoughts, like I'm so used to watching YouTube videos where when I'm watching them, I can leave a comment. And it's to the point now where when I'm doing something like listening to a podcast or watching a TV show, I have an idea and I want to leave a comment and I can't. So if you've had that experience while listening, feel free to share your thoughts via tom@enthusiasmproject.com. You can send in a written message, an audio message, or a video message, and I'll be sure to include those. And of course, there's links to Kevin, who did all the artwork. There's links to the microphone that I'm using in the show notes and all of that fun stuff. So thank you so much for spending your time with me. I hope you have a safe, happy, healthy, fun rest of your week, and I will see you next time.